So, willkommen in London. Willkommen bei unserem Webinar Online-Handel im Vereinigten Königreich, Teil 3, Mastering Your Online Sales. Mein Name ist Michael Müller, ich bin der Wirtschaftsdelegierte hier am Außenwirtschaftscenter der Wirtschaftskammer in London und darf unser Team seit 2 Jahren führen und gemeinsam mit meinem Team österreichische Unternehmen bei allen Geschäftsbelangen im Vereinigten Königreich unterstützen. Warum sind wir heute hier? Weil Online-Sales super spannend ist. Großbritannien ist der mit Abstand größte Online-Markt Europas und das schon seit vielen Jahren. Und warum sind wir auch hier? Weil es natürlich etwas ist, wo wir auch hoffen, dass im Online-Sales-Bereich, im E-Commerce, durchaus auch kleinere Brands, kleinere Hersteller aus Österreich ihre Chance nutzen können, auf einem kaufkräftigen und sehr sophisticated Market das ein oder andere Produkt gut abzusetzen. Bevor wir starten, einige Housekeeping Rules. Natürlich Fragen bitte gerne stellen. Es gibt eine Chat-Funktion. Bitte da die Chats stellen. Mein Stellvertreter Gilbert Matteo wird am Ende unseres Webinars die Fragen durchgehen und wir werden die in einer Q&A-Session behandeln. Wenn eine Frage wahnsinnig komplex ist und einfach den Rahmen sprengt, werden wir die aufnehmen, heute dann online und nicht beantworten, aber Ihnen eine Antwort nach dem Webinar zukommen lassen. Die Folien, die Sie jetzt dann gleich sehen werden, bekommen Sie zugesendet und Sie bekommen auch eine Aufzeichnung des Webinars. Das heißt, Sie können sich voll auf den Inhalt konzentrieren, auf Ihren Business Case, spannende Fragen stellen, sodass wir eine gute Stunde miteinander verbringen können. So, wer spricht denn heute zu Ihnen? Mich haben Sie schon kennengelernt, and now I'll switch to English because the main part of our webinar will be delivered in English by Jack Stratton. So Jack, we've known him for some years now and been working with Insider Trends for some years, always with really fantastic feedback from Austrian business. And he's a well-known and renowned figure in the retail world, working internationally, being a frequent speaker at conferences from the US to Europe and other countries. So we are absolutely thrilled to have him because he has proven in all our collaborations that he has brought very unique insights and very tangible takeaways for participants. So Jack, thank you for being with us. And also with us, und jetzt mache ich auf Deutsch wieder weiter, ist mein Stellvertreter Gilbert Matteo, der, wie schon angekündigt, dann mit uns die Q&A-Session machen wird. Noch ein kleiner Hinweis, bevor ich ein paar Worte sage. Wer dann heute viel mehr Lust bekommt, von Jack Stratton noch mehr zu hören, er wird am 5. Mai bei der Excellence Austria Konferenz in Wien sein und dort sprechen. Wenn da Interesse ist, Sie sehen im Chat den Link. So, jetzt ganz kurz von mir, warum ist denn das Vereinigte Königreich spannend für die österreichische Wirtschaft? Sie sehen hier gleich, das sind unsere Exportzahlen 2025, also die letzten. Und Sie sehen, es ist bergauf gegangen in einem schwierigen Umfeld weltweit. Wir alle wissen das und es wird von Tag zu Tag turbulenter. Haben wir letztes Jahr ein ganz gutes Plus hinlegen können, dank der österreichischen Unternehmen und Exporteure. Fast 7% und das Vereinigte Königreich ist damit, was den Warenverkehr betrifft, zum 9. wichtigsten Exportmarkt gekommen, ja, von 2024 auf Rang 10. Bei Dienstleistungen sind wir Rang 5 und wir sind wahnsinnig stark in UK investiert. Warum ist der Markt einfach spannend? Einerseits die Größe, die Tiefe, nicht zu vergessen, es ist noch immer die 6. größte Wirtschaft der Welt. Und natürlich gerade im Retail-Bereich auch wahnsinnig spannend, weil man hier Innovation hat, die Briten Early Adopter sind, Dinge schnell aufgreifen und natürlich vor allem auch London so ein bisschen nach wie vor diese globale Rolle hat, ein globales Schaufenster ist und eine globale Referenz. Sie sehen hier den Überblick zum UK E-Commerce. Wie erwähnt, es ist der Europas größter und reifster Markt. Das heißt, es ist immer spannend zu sehen, welche Trends es hier gibt, die dann etwas später auf den anderen europäischen Ländern Fuß fassen. Was man auch sieht, über 90% der Bevölkerung kaufen Produkte online. Es gibt ein ausgefinkeltes Fulfillment-System, vor allem in den großen Städten kann man erwarten, sehr viele Produkte sehr rasch geliefert zu bekommen. Und auch wenn es der Wirtschaft in Summe nicht so gut geht, zeigen eigentlich die Online-Sales trotzdem einen stetigen Aufwärtstrend. Sie sehen das auf den nächsten Folien dann noch in einigen Grafiken dargestellt. Ja, also mit quasi ungefähr 1/3 aller Einzelhandelsumsätze werden online erzielt. Und Sie sehen, dass das auch dieser Anteil immer weiter steigt. Ich möchte aber gar nicht mich zu lange aufhalten, sondern darauf hinweisen, dass heute wir den dritten Teil eines Webinars führen, weil Onlinehandel natürlich, seitdem es den Brexit gegeben hat, ein sehr komplexes Thema geworden ist. Ja, es gibt keinen freien Warenverkehr mehr, das heißt, man muss sich überlegen, es ist ein Drittmarkt. Import, Exportabwicklung, wie mache ich das? Einschränkungen für bestimmte Warenkategorien, zum Beispiel Lebensmittel, Fragen wie wickle ich eine Warenretour ab? Wie steht es um Datenschutzbestimmungen? Was muss ich da beachten? Und deshalb haben wir, und Sie sehen es hier und können sich das auch alles gerne durchsehen, schon 2 Webinare durchgeführt, die sich wirklich darauf konzentriert haben, wie mache ich denn eine korrekte Abwicklung? Welche rechtlichen Belange sind zu beachten? Im Webinar 1 war das sehr stark darauf ausgerichtet, aus meinem eigenen Webshop in Österreich nach Großbritannien zu verkaufen. Wie funktioniert das? Und im zweiten Webinar waren wir dann viel stärker fokussiert auf die Online-Marktplätze. Ja, also wie kann ich mich aufstellen? Was sind praktikable Methoden zu arbeiten, wenn ich das machen möchte? Und sehr viele Spezialthemen, also zum Beispiel Datenschutz, Umsatzsteuer, Warenrücksendungen. Und heute, Sie sehen es hier in Blau, geht es wirklich eigentlich um einen ganz anderen Part, nämlich um den, wie reüssiere ich denn auf dem sehr großen, aber auch sehr kompetitiven Online-Markt im Vereinigten Königreich. Was sind die letzten Trends? Was sind die Kundenerwartungen? Und was ist vielleicht doch Best Practice, gerade auch für kleinere Unternehmen, um hier Kunden zu gewinnen und gute Verkäufe zu erzielen? And with that introduction, Jack, I hope you're still there. I would like to kindly ask you to share your presentation and give us a deep dive into the exciting UK online landscape.
Super. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for the lovely introduction, Michael. And really nice to see you all here. I think probably one or two of you I might have even encountered before, having kind of worked with Advantage Austria and WKO for a number of years now. So pleased to be able to jump in today and do this and actually, dig into exactly how the kind of e-commerce landscape looks, as an Austrian brand or more broadly as an international brand entering the UK at the moment. Now, I've just started sharing my screen. I'm assuming you can all see that okay. Shout if not. But I broadly in the next kind of 30 minutes am going to, at a fairly high level, try and look at the kind of what is a very saturated UK e-commerce landscape to give you a sense broadly of, where it's at, what really makes sense in terms of a strategy when you're entering, give you a few examples of international brands who've successfully navigated this landscape, and what they did that worked, so you can take those away, and lots of hints and tips along the way, but also just give you a real sense of not just as international brands, but more broadly what the defining trends are within e-commerce at the moment in the UK, because it is a market that's changing very, very quickly, just like it is everywhere else in Europe. Just a note to say, I've got not really even a cold, but I'm just kind of a little bit full of, stuff. So I might sound ever so slightly nasally at a certain point. Don't think that's a lack of enthusiasm or something. I'm nasally because of that. So let me jump straight in. Let me start by saying, and actually I'll just go back just to say, I think I work so much with Advantage Austria that I sometimes forget just to properly introduce myself as well. But look, I work with lots of different international brands, looking broadly at retail trends. Sometimes that's online, sometimes that's physical stores, sometimes that's consumer trends. And I work with, kind of big global brands like this, helping them to, figure out what's going to be happening next. I'm going to start at a particularly high level. I just wanted to kind of almost in the first couple of minutes, zoom right out, and and I kind of thought for everyone here, and listening to this recording afterwards, how would I summarize just in a couple of minutes of what is going on in UK e-commerce at the moment? Well, I would say it's saturation, but because of the saturation, opportunity. That is really in some ways best described by what's happening with Temu and Shein. Now, Temu and Shein are strong forces all across Europe now and all across the world, but I think it's difficult to underestimate how much more mature they are in the UK. You can kind of look at that through some of these statistics. So, 50% of the UK population has bought from either Temu or Shein, right? If I look across the Europe, if I look at the Nordics, if I look at certain parts of, Eastern Europe, Southern Europe, those percentages can be quite a bit lower. There's still a fair degree of skepticism about one or both of these vast retail marketplaces. But in the UK, it's safe to say that for all the issues these companies might have in terms of ethics, in terms of their potential challenges for small businesses, these vast marketplaces are used by everyone now in the UK population, and it's growing, and they're not going anywhere. And in fact, the real most important story here is that both of these businesses now, they have kind of migrated from what you would have heard of historically as the factory to consumer model. That was this thing, you would have heard about it, but they escaped the de minimis shipping rule and can provide cheaper prices by sending small shipments from a factory directly to a customer and avoid middlemen and all the costs associated with it. So a Chinese factory produces a product, so say t-shirts for Shein, and it sends them direct to a consumer in the UK. Now, that was how Shein built their customer base, their market share. That's how Temu built its market share. But actually, that is no longer their story. They are really using a lot of the money they've made and the market share growth they've enjoyed to strengthen their logistics. They are teaming up with big players. They are teaming up with last mile delivery companies. They are teaming up with technology companies who are speeding things up. Something like 20 to 30% of the products that Temu offer now in the UK are actually, often in warehouses in huge volumes in the UK. So they can actually offer next day delivery. For years, Temu were doing 5, 6, 7 day delivery. They're doing next day or 2 day delivery on many of those products. And the same with Shein. They are becoming Amazon-like marketplaces. What I say to clients all the time is you cannot underestimate the impact on a market of, if you say, here's Amazon. Amazon have been a big player in the UK now for more than a decade. What would it look like if we added 2 or 3 more Amazons? And in a sense, that's what Temu and Shein are doing. It's not like there's more customers. The UK population is pretty similar, but we've got more Amazons in the UK now. That's the reality. It's very, very saturated. And that's just, I think, an important and honest conversation that has to happen. It isn't easy entering the UK for a variety of post-Brexit reasons, but it also isn't easy because it's saturated. However, the good news about this, and the really important news, is that actually there's a very strong and growing consensus that UK e-commerce is kind of oversaturated to the point that customers aren't really able to find what they want to find. Temu and Shein, for example, they actually have quite bad repeat buying rates. They get lots of people buying from them once or twice, but they're not buying from them again. Now, that's because they don't have a great customer experience, but also because they find those environments overwhelming, just like they do Amazon. It's almost too much product. They're not as brilliant as they claim at personalizing, and they don't curate an offer for a lot of customers that they're looking for. And the truth is that this is leading to overwhelmed consumers. 64% of customers in the UK feel overwhelmed by choice. And another survey found that 74% of customers abandon shopping baskets because they feel bombarded by content. So one of the main reasons that people choose not to buy, even when they've loaded up their basket on a website in the UK, is that they just feel like they see too much content at the point of buying, which I think is fascinating. It never happens in a physical store, but also in a curated, more niche marketplace, this doesn't happen. It's a very different experience. So what I'm saying to brands all the time at the moment is the saturation of UK e-commerce. You could be negative and say, well, that's a reason not to enter. Or you could look at really what's happening and say, actually, that saturation is a reason to enter intelligently and with curation and with focus, because actually done right, that will work. Fern are a UK brand, but in many ways, they're the best example of this. Now, Fern just sell online by a kind of tiny showroom in the UK. They sell fragrances. They sell fragrances on subscription through e-commerce. They're not selling on Amazon. They don't have a big marketplace strategy. And they are absolutely flying, to the extent that LVMH and L'Oreal are trying to acquire them. Fern are saying no, they don't want to be acquired. But they are a kind of mid-level kind of premium fragrance business selling online, growing enormously online. And the exact precise reason that Fern are doing well, and they've said this themselves, is that their strategy is literally a kind of anti-Amazon strategy, an anti-saturation strategy. So they just produce great content. They work a lot on TikTok. They work a lot through their own website. And what they've done is they've really found these customers that I was just talking about here, who are feeling overwhelmed, and given them something very, very specific. Now, it's working so well, they have something like a 20,000 person waiting list. Fern actually can't produce enough perfume for the demand they've built online. Really, I'm not just telling you about Fern because you should copy their strategy. That's very difficult to do. They're a fairly miraculous business. Fern, more to the point, I think, should be inspiration for if you're considering coming into the UK market as a niche business, that it can be done, because there are customers that still want new brands and new products. It's not just a story of saturation, but you will have to have a very clear, distinct, exciting strategy. And that's kind of, what I'll start to go into in the rest of the presentation. But the top level point there is that, yes, it's saturated, but saturation does lead to opportunity as well. Customers want something different. Now, this just partly might build a little bit on what Michael was saying, but I just wanted to briefly kind of give you a snapshot of where really the UK is at in terms of the e-com market and consumer trends fueling the e-com market at the moment. So first, a brief kind of snapshot of what's going on. We're at 30% of UK retail sales are online. I think Michael hinted at very similar stats. Amazon in particular dominates with more than 30% market share. So 30% of that 30%, and actually it's growing towards 35%, is on Amazon. Amazon is becoming too big to ignore, pretty much, for any business that's entering the UK. But actually, the more fundamental point is that marketplaces now have become the kind of defining place. I think it's no longer a case of just getting listed with a particular retailer. That might be important for some brands in some places, but these days, entering the UK means having a marketplace strategy, not really an online strategy, not a retail strategy, a marketplace strategy. Because even the retailers themselves are becoming marketplaces. Actually, Tesco and Sainsbury's, for example, big supermarkets, the big reason behind their success in recent years online is that they became marketplaces. So Sainsbury's brought in Argos to fulfill every other kind of product that they don't do within their supermarkets. Tesco do clothing and home and kitchen and all kinds of other stuff. Next, who were a fashion retailer, are now becoming an almost everything retailer, a marketplace. So that's really the point here, is that e-commerce is the biggest, UK e-commerce is the biggest e-commerce market in the UK. Amazon dominates, but marketplaces dominate more generally. The other side of the story that might be lesser known, but that is no less important, is, so if this is where people buy, if this is what's happening in terms of purchasing behavior, well, discovery behavior. So how, and really the first point for you, how do you actually get found in the UK now? All the growth stories at the moment, all the energy, honestly, is coming in TikTok. TikTok's growth in the UK is vast. These are TikTok stats. 30 million active users of TikTok. That's half of the UK population. 58% of them have used TikTok Shop, which is extraordinary. So half of the UK population that are on TikTok and actively using it regularly have then gone on to look at brands. Many of them, of course, buying, but they've gone into TikTok Shop and started playing around with retail brands in that environment. Remember that TikTok Shop's only been around for a year or two. This is a completely new kind of growth funnel when entering the UK. If you do it right, it's completely organic and largely free. And it is now probably the biggest discovery engine in UK retail. So I could give you loads of different ideas and tips, and we'll go into some of those others. But honestly, whatever you're doing in selling, if you're looking at the next 5 to 10 years and entering the UK market, you need a strategy for being talked about, discussed on TikTok if you're going to be in the UK. Simple as that. It is the best, most meaningful way of being discovered. TikTok is basically a discovery platform. 88% of TikTok users say they found a new brand on the platform. It is a brand discovery platform. And we'll touch on this at the end, but everything that's happening with AI directly relates to this. What people don't recognize enough is that TikTok is incredibly good from a technology point of view at using AI to amplify what's going on here and to fuel their algorithms. So TikTok's algorithm doesn't just pick up trends by written content or visual content, but actually it picks up sounds, it picks up aesthetics. It's incredibly intelligent in terms of how it builds trends. And you can't game the system. You know, it's not like you can stuff keywords into TikTok like you did your own website many years ago. TikTok is something else. It's not easy to get big on TikTok, but you have to really take it very seriously when you're thinking about entering the UK. We'll touch more on that in a minute. However, at the same time, there's this, and all will become clear shortly, but there's this confusing narrative, but a very true one nonetheless, that social media, particularly in the UK, is sort of dying. So in terms of consumer trends, this is one of my big ones. If you're entering e-commerce in the UK, you have to be looking at social media. Social media is declining in the UK. I really encourage you after this to Google, and you'll be able to find it very easily, a Financial Times social media survey conducted in October of 2025, so last year. What it found was that the traditional social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, even to some degree Instagram, they are declining in terms of new users. They are declining in terms of how often people are using them, and also the way people are using them is changing. People are no longer using them socially, in other words, meeting people, finding old friends, sharing opinions. Now their survey found people primarily use them just to kill time and follow celebrities. Social media is dying, and the way we use it is dying. But the real story actually is that it isn't really dying, it's changing. So what really, all the energy in the UK now is with video. That means it's with TikTok. And social media, and this is really, really important to distinguish in your minds. TikTok is not a social media channel. TikTok is an entertainment platform. It's a video platform. The reasons for its growth is that it entertains people, and they're not socializing. They're just consuming video, consuming entertaining content. And basically the content they like enough, they'll click through and then potentially engage with the brands, discover them, buy from them. That is the path. TikTok is more like QVC, so, you know, TV shopping in the 1990s, than it is Facebook or another social media challenge. This is an important thing to have in your mind as a brand coming into the UK. This is a small but incredibly important shift in the way consumers are kind of behaving and engaging with stuff online. They're not socializing. They're not on social media, you know, sharing ideas and sharing things they bought like once upon a time they did in Facebook. That's not happening. What is happening is they're watching videos, and the videos that cut through where they have a relationship with a brand, those brands then get application and break through. That's why TikTok becomes so important. Now, the final part of this bit, I just wanted to briefly sort of touch on consumer motivations, which are, you know, mainly we're talking here about e-commerce, but just I thought it'd be good to touch on, well, in terms of you guys trying to kind of tailor your offer for the UK or think about what's really going to catch on. I was looking around thinking, well, what are the defining themes at the moment in the ether in the UK that are really shaping what people buy, the brands they choose to shop with? So here's a kind of selection of them, the kind of 3 or 4 biggest ones that stood out to me. The first one is affordable luxury. And the best story of this is probably the most successful market entry into the UK story of recent years. Sostrena. Now, Sostrena are doing well online and offline, but actually at the heart of their strategy is a physical store strategy. So they've opened, I think, nearly 70 stores in the UK in the last couple of years, which is ridiculous. No other brand has gone anywhere near that. Hugely successful. So they are a kind of small homewares and gifting business from Denmark. and they sell all kinds of different bits and bobs for the home, almost like an IKEA, but slightly more premium. But the reason, beyond anything else, for all the reading you could do about Sostrena Grena, the number one reason by a mile that they are flying in the UK is that they offer affordable luxury. Because what you have in the UK, and this is very different to an Austrian consumer and very different to most consumers, maybe other than Americans, is what you have in the UK at the moment is a collision of two forces. On the one hand, everyone feels nervous about the future, financially anxious, cautious. They don't feel like they have much money, and they're worried about financial security in the future. So on the one hand, they're worried about affordability. On the other, they are spending all their life on TikTok, being shown hundreds of new brands all the time. And so they have this constant feeling and need for new brands and new stuff. So their appetite to buy stuff is not diminishing, but their sense of affording stuff is kind of very, very strong as well. So the sweet spot, more than ever that I've seen it, is affordable luxury, giving customers a sense that yes, they can have new stuff, but they can have it affordably. This is what Sostrena Grena does, and this is what I think, whatever kind of business is on or watching this, if you can find your way of hitting affordable luxury with your proposition, that is the sweet spot at the moment, giving people who are feeling a bit nervous, a bit anxious, a bit cautious, the sense that they can afford something great. Because what Sostrena Grena do is they present quite nice looking products in nice looking stores that are fairly distinct, feel a little bit premium, but actually at almost IKEA prices. Everything's handwritten, everything's well merchandised, everything looks good, the website looks good, there's lots of good storytelling, handwriting, lots of little things that make people feel, oh, this is a nice retail environment, but it's super cheap. That is the key to their growth beyond anything else. So yes, I would say affordable luxury. If you can find your way as a brand of tapping into that, you're onto a winner. Next, I would say, this is an obvious point, but in a saturated marketplace, it's really important if you can find your way of being and feeling new and or niche. So having a different kind of looking, feeling product, or finding a model that means you can sell it in a different kind of a way. Bubble Skincare are an American brand who've done incredibly well in the UK. The reason they've done really well isn't really that the product is all that different to lots of other brands on the market, but it's the way they've been able to present. They have a very niche marketing strategy that's incredibly clever, and it's an ambassador program. And what they did is they continue to do it. They go around the world finding people who are interested in their content, just people who follow them online. And they say, do you want to be a Bubble Skincare ambassador? They don't pay them any money, but they say, we will send you sample products before we release them. And then as those ambassadors build up, they have to get a 90% acceptance rate from those people. So in other words, they send them out, and if 90% of those people say, yes, this is a good product, then they release it. But then, of course, what happens is all of these ambassadors, these 80,000 ambassadors, they post online and say, look, I've just tried this product. It's going to be released tomorrow. And they give them, a small code that they can share and like an affiliate system. And that has become the number one driving force behind the very large and significant growth of Bubble Skincare. This organic ambassador program that actually has become an affiliate scheme. It's like an old-fashioned affiliate scheme. It is brilliant. It's an amazing marketing strategy, totally different to any other beauty brand I've seen. And actually, it makes what is a relatively normal product feel very new and niche because it's marketed and presented completely differently. So new and niche products or new and niche kind of marketing strategies are essential. Another defining consumer trend, and I think this is relevant to, I think, often how Austrian retailers innately do business, is how there's a real growing trend that is a sense that consumers feel like luxury today isn't status or isn't shiny new things. It's actually about longevity. It's about brands and products that have stood the test of time, that have been here for a long time. This is actually at the heart of the growth of Vinted. Vinted is growing faster in the UK than any other country. So a fashion resale platform. It is absolutely flying. And more broadly on other marketplaces, on eBay and through own channels, resale is growing absolutely everywhere. But Vinted isn't growing because people don't have any money and they want to buy secondhand stuff. That's what people think, but it's not true. Actually, the biggest kind of portion of Vinted growth is at the premium end. And often it's traditional brands. So it's Ralph Lauren, it's Tommy Hilfiger, and Lacoste, and it's young customers who are going onto Vinted, and they're finding vintage products not to save money, and not just because it's cool or sustainable, but because they believe that the older version of these products is better than the newer one. They genuinely believe that the real luxury of modern retail is longevity, is stuff that has been around for a long time. If you have those stories in your business to tell online, that is going to be really, really important, because at the moment it feels like longevity, nostalgia, anything seeming kind of vintage, traditional, a story that can tell a product that's been around for a long time, used by generations, made well, made properly. This stuff really matters at the moment. Young consumers in the UK, especially, but actually most consumer groups, they are increasingly kind of tired of how quickly everything changes. You know, how t-shirts don't last more than a few washes, how sofas wear away, how technology has to be replaced every couple of years. There is real growing kind of cynicism and anger towards that stuff. Longevity, well-made stuff is becoming really, really important at a brand level and a product level. And the final point here is that I think more than the rest of Europe, and the reason I presented this, is that actually British people they have a real kind of, and I think it can be overlooked, but it's really important online, it's really important everywhere. They have this strong habit that just hasn't gone away of, not taking themselves too seriously, being quite cynical about everything, but also as a result, having a very strong sense of humor and wanting to see brands who don't take themselves too seriously and can sometimes be able to be a little bit different, a bit unusual, a bit eccentric. And IKEA is the perfect example of this. IKEA opened this enormous pop-up in London that was called the Blue Bag pop-up. And what they did is a key part of it is they had their famous, very cheap blue bag that everyone has. But they presented it in glass cases like they were luxury handbags with a little label next to them that said 25 pence or whatever, or 75 pence. It was really, really funny. But also, IKEA didn't do this anywhere else in the world. They did it in the UK. And it was a huge viral success. Why did they do it in the UK? Why was it successful? It's because IKEA understood the eccentricity of the British public, the humour of the British public, the fact they don't take things too seriously. And that kind of marketing really, really works in the UK. Not necessarily just funny, but just distinct, eccentric and unusual. I could give you so many brands that do this brilliantly as kind of benchmarks, and I'd be happy to share them. But I would be thinking, whatever you're doing, is how is your brand positioning when it comes to the UK distinct? It might be perfectly well positioned already before you come, but you might have to shift certain parts of it just to make it UK ready in that sense, especially when you're just selling online and you don't have physical stores to tell the story. How is it distinct? How is it eccentric? How is it memorable in some way? And maybe you can even bring some humor into it, because that really works. Now, just quickly, sort of for the last 5-10 minutes of this, a couple of brand cases. So it'll be really nice to tell you specific stories about a few brands from other countries that are doing really well in the UK and they're in the middle of their journey. I'll tell you the beginning of their story, but then I'd encourage you to go and read more about them to really dig into their stories and maybe gain some more inspiration from what they've done and the choices they've made. Firstly, Vilgain Health Foods. So Vilgain, based in Czech Republic, they actually have a physical store I saw a little while ago in Prague. Very high-end premium health foods, a wide variety of kind of supplements, nutritional products, stuff, whether you're kind of fitness training or just if you just want to be healthier and lead a healthy life. Anyway, they entered the UK. They're growing about 100% a year. They've only been here for a couple of years, and they're flying. They've done really well. Good solid first year. I think they've been here 3.5 years, and they've grown by about 100% every year. They are in some physical stores now, but this is primarily an e-commerce focused business. So what are they doing? Well, the simple story is they have an Amazon and a direct-to-consumer website that they put kind of equal energy to. So you'll hear a lot when it comes to e-com strategy, but you'll think a lot about, is it marketplace or do you focus more on D2C? In many cases, it's really both, actually. The secret is doing both, but perhaps thinking about them in different ways. And, Vilgain are an example of a business that's very cleverly managing both sides of things. I'll say now, and this is really important, I've heard many businesses in the US and the UK tell me, this is many years after getting big on Amazon, that they regret not putting money, effort, and energy into their own website, their own D2C website, when they grow on Amazon. Because what they said is, after a certain point of time, it's very difficult to turn the clock and rebuild your own website when you've become big on Amazon. But then, as Amazon might start increasing their fees, they might, let's face it, use your data to inform their own white labeled product range and do everything that Amazon does. Remember, Amazon always wins from the brands listed on their website. The brands sometimes win, but Amazon always wins. So you need to use them, but it's important that you don't have all your eggs in the Amazon basket. I firmly believe that. I think Vilgain are a great example of a business that does this in a rebalanced way. So they have a great customized Amazon marketplace. So they pay to have their own page. They look very similar, but there's a significant difference. What they do really cleverly, and I really like it, is that in their own website, they go deeper into their own story. So as you're looking at this screen here, on the lower right-hand side is their own website. On the upper left-hand side is Amazon. And the big difference between the two really is the fact that they go deep into storytelling on their own website. And that's because they know that the customer on their own website, they want to build loyalty, they want to learn more about them, build data, that there's a broader set of kind of KPIs that they're trying to develop. Whereas, Amazon is more like reach new customers and introduce them to the brand and sell stuff. So they kind of see Amazon as the place to keep growing the business, keep growing market share, and build awareness, but their own website really to build the brand, build the business, and to build that loyal customer relationship. And by all accounts, they're growing both at the same time. So they do quite a big volume of sales through their own website and a big volume on Amazon. And there's no real conflict of interest there. They're happy to do both. But importantly, as they grow, their own website is, they spend a lot of money on making sure that's visible as well. The last piece of the puzzle here, though, is just as I mentioned earlier, Vilgain put almost all of their marketing budget into finding influencers and a kind of community of Vilgain fans and sponsoring them with affiliate links to post on TikTok. And that really is quite a simple but very clear strategy. And they've done brilliantly as a result. They went out and found some young, I would say they've had a really good strategy of not just going to really big famous celebrities on TikTok. It's more just people who are very passionate about nutrition, people who really wanted to work with Vilgain, maybe people who didn't work with too many other brands in the first place. Develop those relationships with them, and then there's a selection of 4 or 5 of them who make great content for them, and that has been a massive part of how they've grown in the UK. Their strategy to me is a simple but very effective one, the kind of strategy I would promote to almost any kind of brand in any sector. Amazon to launch discovery, sales, own website to develop loyalty and great customer relationships. TikTok for proper kind of viral discovery, brand discovery in the first place. Really solid strategy. A couple of other cases there that do things slightly differently to give you a sense of how else it can be done. So this is Flabulous. Flabulous do have physical stores. They sell Spanish espadrilles, kind of beautiful plimsolls, one kind of simple style done in a range of different colors and materials. There's a few stores across Europe. They're based in Spain. Really great business. But UK entry was e-com first. They have a store now, or a couple of stores actually, but it's very much an e-commerce story. What did they do? Well, they actually have gone the other way. They've avoided all of the mass marketplaces. That's because they're a more premium brand and they feel like trying to find customers on Amazon would dilute the kind of brand value. It isn't the right place. But even the really big, they haven't put too much energy into a kind of broader retail marketplace, like say a Next or a John Lewis. They avoid that. What they do instead is they've gone to relevant marketplaces like shoe marketplaces, like Office, big shoe retailer in the UK. So they do business with them. That makes sense. Good brand reach, good sales. But also they've gone to lots of different, very small niche marketplaces like Fasciola, who Fasciola are, I would say, if you're in fashion, any of you, or footwear, they are a great example of a very niche marketplace. If you're kind of premium and above footwear and you're a brand from out of the UK coming to the UK, they are perfect because they have a really strong kind of customer base who are looking for exactly those things and really welcome the new brands that come in. They curate a really lovely selection. That's their strategy. So it's kind of niche, avoiding mass market, and it's led to pretty steady growth. And what they've done, a lot like Vilgain are doing, is that they are now starting to build their own UK fulfillment. So investing in their own logistics. They've just paid for a small warehouse in the north of the UK. On the back of growing in these niche marketplaces, they will now open a UK domain, which they'll ship directly from. So they're going to take a lot of the traffic from these websites and try and direct it into their own, do their own fulfillment. And that's the long-term play for them. Michael Aram is another story. And again, I've really presented these three because they're all kind of different, right? And all successful. That's the thing. So Vilgain with that combo of Amazon and, balancing across some different marketplaces. Flabulous avoiding mass and going niche. And then Michael Aram, who, really what they've done, which is very interesting, is this is a very premium luxury kind of homewares and lifestyle designer from the US. And you would expect, given on what he makes and how he sells in the US, and growing slowly into the UK, but well, and getting some investment, you would assume that Michael Aram would not sell on Amazon, but he absolutely does. But he doesn't have a kind of dedicated Vilgain page intentionally. Michael Aram has avoided that. What he's done instead is licensed a small range of his products to a small selection of distributors and sellers in the UK. So he's built a relationship with a few of them just for the best sellers. So what he did is he kind of went into the data and said, look, here's 20 or 30 of our most easily mass-produced, most profitable products that we know people are already looking at online in the UK. We're going to find distributors in the UK to hold large volumes of these products, and they'll sell them for us through Amazon. So that's going to help to grow the brand and help to establish strong sales in the UK. But then at the same time, we are going to do a play where we go to 4 or 5 different niche, really niche marketplaces. Tulip is a great example of this. Again, if you're looking for a recommendation to try and get listed in a premium homewares lifestyle marketplace, Tulip is superb, very curated, very, very trusted. There's a lot of customers who will buy everything for their home from this one. Their relationship is with Tulip. It's not really with the brands, and they trust whatever brands are listed within that environment. So this is really quite an interesting combination, like a super premium brand with a super premium marketplace strategy, but that also says, I'm happy to sell 30 or 40 products in high volume through Amazon just to keep feeding cash flow into the company. Really, really smart. And I think ultimately what Michael Aram are a good reminder of is that you can't totally ignore Amazon. They're kind of too big at this point. They're too important and too useful for market share and for long-term growth. So a few use cases there. I could give you loads more, but it's probably better for the last 15 minutes for us to just be able to chat through some questions. But very final thoughts. I didn't want to make this presentation too AI dominated, as they often can be. But look, the only thing I would say in the UK that you should be thinking about when it comes to your AI strategy at the moment is what AI means for search and discovery of your brands, of your products. That's where your AI budget, your AI thinking, your AI focus should go into. It's for brand discovery and search. The rest of it I wouldn't worry about. People are talking about agentic commerce. Sorry, the volume was left on that one. But people are talking about agentic commerce in terms of this futuristic idea where you go onto a website and you can tell an agent what you want to buy and give it your credit card details, and it does it for you across a range of different brands. It sort of might happen in some context in the near future, but this is not happening in the real world at the moment, and not something to plan for too much. We have other AI companies like the One-Off, which is actually built by an agent, and this does a remarkable thing where you can say, who you want to be like when you get dressed, who you want to look like. So I put Harry Styles here, and then they tell me where I can buy clothes in order to dress like Harry Styles. There's all these crazy AI generated things going on, and some of that can be really interesting. Some of that generate interesting conversations. AI can also massively amplify what you do in the UK, right? So now, if you're a fashion business, you could use AI to give you a load of AI generated models for your products. So you have your products, and you can suddenly generate 50 images with models that don't exist through Boutica for a small amount of money each month through Shopify. This stuff is all happening, and it's all significant. But really, when it comes to entering the UK, the part of AI that you should be interested in is what it means for search. And my way of explaining that very quickly and simply, but it's really important, is actually that it's about almost old-fashioned SEO techniques, remarkably. Best story that I've had recently is when I worked with Ralph Lauren. Ralph Lauren invested a huge amount of money in terms of into a program that was focused on getting young people to buy secondhand Ralph Lauren, vintage Ralph Lauren, in a couple of their own spaces and pop-ups or Selfridges in London. Big marketing campaign to do it. And what I'm kind of showing you in this video here is that no one, when they did an AI search within Google, no one found what they'd put money into. Instead, if you put, as I did, best Ralph Lauren resellers London, the AI wasn't taking you to Ralph Lauren. The AI was taking you to a number of secondhand and vintage shops or online marketplaces. The reason it did that is because all of these that are listed here have got incredible credibility when it comes to being found by AI, because they focus on content, because they've been around for a long time, because AI is going onto TikTok, onto Instagram, and it's looking at how Ralph Lauren is being mentioned in lots of different places. When Ralph Lauren was trying to tell the world themselves, come and find us, the AI ignores it because it looks like paid advertising, and AI ignores that. This is incredibly important, is that your strategy for entering the UK around AI, actually, you almost should forget building AI into it. The key is going to be, can you get your brand talked about in an organic way online? Can you be talked about in Instagram? Can you be talked about on TikTok? Can you just become part of the broader conversation? The power of someone else talking about you rather than you talking about you in an AI world is so much bigger and more important. And that's where your energy should be put into when it comes to your strategy in the future. I'm going to stop sharing now so we have time for questions. So hopefully you can see me again now.
Jack, we can see you clearly, and thank you very much for this very insightful presentation. I enjoyed it a lot, and I would expect and assume that our Austrian companies also enjoyed it a lot and learned a lot. Thank you very much for that. So we have still some time left for the Q&A, but considering the time, I would, yes, move on to the questions. I mean, we received one question in the chat, so I would maybe start with that one so I can read it aloud for you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the first question. So it's, dear Jack, thank you for the fantastic insights. You mentioned agentic commerce briefly. Studies show that agentic commerce will cause for 25% of all e-commerce in 2030. How do you think will agentic commerce influence the situation around e-commerce in the UK within the next 3 to 5 years? And B, what does that mean for brick and mortar retailers in the UK? And leaving big cities like London and Manchester aside, what does C, e-commerce boosted by agentic commerce, cause in the smaller cities in the UK? So that was long. Please let me know if I should repeat something again for you. But
no, that's great. I've met Alexander a couple of times before, so great to see you, Alexander, and thanks. Such a good question. So my feeling at the moment on agentic commerce is that it is absolutely massive and will change retail a lot, and probably in the UK faster than the rest of Europe. But the only part I'm certain it will change at the moment is search and discovery of brands. I haven't really seen any evidence yet that it will change end-to-end commerce. In other words, I'm not sure that it will be 25% of all e-commerce in 2030 from the point of view of an end-to-end sale. So an agent influences the discovery of the product, but also influences the actual purchase decision. What I think is that we have an agent absolutely influencing finding the product, but I think as you get closer to the purchase, people will start to take control more. I think there's a real issue around, simple things like people handing over payment information to an agent, actually. But similarly, the way that's connected, and doubts and skepticism around that. But agentic commerce, being part of e-commerce, absolutely it will be. And how will it influence the situation in the UK? The main thing will be that it relates to what I said at the end of my presentation, really, is that it will mean that I don't think traditional pay-per-click or kind of keyword paid for and advertising optimized marketing in e-commerce is going to be quite rapidly dismantled, I think, in the UK. You will not be able to just game that system. If you have a load of funding from someone, maybe years ago, you could just buy a load of ads and you could guarantee a certain market share fairly quickly. I think those days are gone. The way these AI agents seem to work is that they are actually much better in terms of helping you to find what you need to find. And they're led by kind of real reviews, content. They're led by what's actually happening, not just what's been paid for. That might change because of, sponsored, but frankly, because ChatGPT and Google will need to find ways of making more money out of generative AI and agentic AI solutions. But I think fundamentally, it's going to change the way that brands are discovered. It's going to make it much more difficult. I think the biggest impact is that brands are really going, big or small, entering the UK market or otherwise. I think it's gone back to a really positive thing, which is that you're going to have good products, good brands, and you're going to have incredible organic content. You're going to have real people on video telling stories about your products, and it won't be able to be, maybe there's an AI route to that, but I don't think there is. I think actually, the AI seems to be leaning towards picking up that great human content. That's the irony of the situation. I think it really needs brilliant organic human content a lot of the time, most of the growth stories I see. As for how all of that affects brick and mortar, I don't yet see a clear way that it will affect it that much more than how e-commerce is already affecting brick and mortar, which is it's taken away some sales from brick and mortar, but over a period of time in the UK, actually it's become very much a world of, whatever word we give it, omni-channel, where brands most customers don't really think of whether they're shopping in a store or online. They just do both, and they just want that experience to be good and consistent, whether they're online or in the store. I think that isn't going to change all that much. The best brands will continue to be the ones that harmonize between channels, where you can find the right product with the same price and the same branding and the same quality wherever you want to shop. I think that will continue to be what's really, really important. And again, I think kind of in terms of smaller cities, funnily enough, in the UK, that is becoming less significant. I think the smallness of the UK is actually starting to mean that, for example, Amazon started next day delivery in London. They're promising that within a year or two, they're going to be doing it in smaller cities all over the UK. The UK really is actually quite quickly just becoming a country where whatever corner you live in, maybe bar, some island on the north of Scotland, where you can buy anything you want whenever you want it. It will be a world where, you can have whatever shopping experience you want. Yeah. So hopefully that answers some of it, Alexander. It's got me thinking a lot, as your questions always do. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that one. I would also have a question, which might be very interesting also for the others. I mean, you mentioned the marketplace giants such as Amazon and Next and Temu, and you also said that you shouldn't put all of your eggs into the Amazon basket, for example. Yeah, and then you mentioned also some niche marketplaces such as Tulip or Fasciola. So are there any other niche marketplaces you could recommend for Austrian SMEs?
Yes, it's tricky. There are so many, and the reason it's difficult to recommend them is the thing that's happened in the UK very rapidly, which is happening, frankly, all over Europe and to some degree the world, is that outside of the giants, the best marketplaces are kind of big niche marketplaces. What I mean by that is they are becoming places that will offer every kind of brand and product for a certain category at a certain price point, and that will be the thing to figure out. So, for example, I would say if you were I don't know, home and furniture, for example, I would say Wayfair. Wayfair are really big, actually, and it's kind of a retailer in some ways. But Wayfair, if it's like sort of level to higher end, not luxury, but mid-level, premium furniture, homewares, lifestyle, Wayfair would be the number one. More important than Amazon, a multi thing, but also more important than like a really small one. But obviously Wayfair wouldn't be in any way relevant to anyone outside of that sector or price point. So if you're selling really cheap homewares, Wayfair's probably not quite right. And if you're super luxury and niche, I'd be saying Tulip Interiors maybe rather than Wayfair. There are so many examples, and I mean, look, anyone is totally free to message, Gilbert, Michael afterwards if you want a couple of recommendations for your particular brand, sector, whatever. I am so happy to do that. I won't share them all now because there are so many, but I'd be quite happy to do that for anyone that wants. But there are so many. I'd say in the UK there are almost some, not just for sectors and price points, but also kind of for consumer groups. You have businesses like Not on the High Street, which is really big now in the UK, which is almost like it's huge, but it has this feeling of being quite small and very independent. And it's lots of small brands. You never get really big brands on there. And, all the brands on there have to be a little bit sustainable, very good at telling stories. So, if you were to tell me about your brand, I might go, Not on the High Street is the number one for you, regardless of what you sell and where you sell it. So I'd be happy to recommend some more privately, but I would say the thing to do is really do your research on other brands, and looking at not just the smaller places like Next, even though Next is big but slightly smaller than Amazon, but actually looking at the sector specific and price specific marketplaces. The UK marketplace landscape is that big that you really have to almost prioritize in that sense. You can't just go after all of them because there are too many.
Thank you, Jack. For the last 2 minutes, I would have two last questions for you, but they're quite basic, but I think they're very important for Austrian SMEs entering the UK market. So what would you say are the minimum expectations a UK customer has when buying from an Austrian web shop? For example, when it comes, to fulfillment, delivery times, payment options, and so on. And the second question is connected to that. What would be the biggest mistakes to avoid? So what are the most common mistakes you see SMEs make when entering a new commerce market in the UK?
Yeah, really good question. So firstly, on the point of I'll take the second one first, because that's immediately come to mind. The biggest mistake for sure is I think being slightly too skewed or focused on the sheer size and growth of the Amazon, Temu, Shein end of the market, and therefore building your entire strategy just on getting listed on those places, but almost building your business around what you think will work on Amazon, Temu, or Shein. And I see brands sort of lose themselves, right? They become like a different version of themselves on Amazon or Temu or Shein just to get some market share and some cash. They kind of go, oh, in the UK, I guess we can be a bit like cheaper and we can be a bit this. And they might get, and the problem is, I think then you find customers, but actually long term, they become the wrong kind of customers, or they have the wrong expectations, because you've sold them a cheaper version of what you do or a different version of you do, and then they find you on your own website or channels, and suddenly they see other products and more premium offers and pricing, and they kind of think, who is this business? So whatever you do, it has to be the same. It has to be consistent. Don't lose yourself in that kind of, because it's quite exciting getting onto Amazon and Temu and Shein, because you've got a huge customer base potentially straight away. But the key is being able to be patient, not losing your kind of brand value and equity, pricing strategy, all the stuff you do well, just to try and get something going on Amazon. That would be my first big mistake. I can't tell you how many brands do that. You're much better off having a really slow few months, but keeping the same price. Let them find you. Do your work in other kinds of marketing rather than losing a sense of who you are. Gilbert, remind me of the first question again, the exact phrasing, because I don't want to answer it.
The first question was like, what would be the minimum expectations, from a UK customer's perspective,
Yes.
when coming to an Austrian e-commerce web shop?
So I think the minimum expectations are incredibly complicated, because on the one hand, Temu and Shein have made our market really strange in that, people have no expectations from those businesses. People are buying T-shirts on Shein that sometimes took, for like £3, that took 10 days to arrive from China. and the quality is appalling, and you can't return it because there's no customer service. So, you know, they have almost normalized a level of customer experience and service that is some of the worst I've ever seen in retail anywhere in the world. So on the one hand, I think the bar is quite low, and it actually, which is great, because just automatically any of you would offer something better than that. You just would. But the weird thing about the UK is they accept those things because they're so cheap and present. And at the same time, British customers have become so used to fast delivery that they will complain if their 4-hour delivery on Amazon comes 4.5 hours later, you know, instead of 4. This is the weird thing about UK customers. So really what I think about that is what you can sort of set your own expectations. If you're a premium business and you say, look, what we make is amazing and it's brilliant, but you're going to have to wait 2 weeks, you can do that. There'll be a bunch of customers that are fine with that. Equally, you can be a cheap business that just said, look, we're cheap, but we get everything to you quickly. You could do that. But actually, what you can't do is kind of offer something and then deliver something slightly different. So I think don't be afraid of if you're not going to be able to ship something quick enough. I don't think that's an issue. You know, I wouldn't get too caught up on that kind of minimum, because customers in the UK will put up with something if it's cheap enough or good enough, actually. But what you will have to do in the UK more than anything is deliver on promises. Whatever you say you will do fulfillment wise, or in terms of price or quality or customer service, deliver on that. That is really, really important, because there's too much choice in the UK. If you can't deliver on your promises, you know, then you'll lose them forever. And Gilbert, I know we've run slightly over. Shall I just answer that last question that's in the chat quickly?
Yes, so we have one last question actually, which is a small company entering the UK market. If you have to prioritize between 3 options of online marketplaces, how would you prioritize? Amazon, their own online shop, or not on the high street? Or would you really suggest that the company would try to be present on all of them?
I think that it's really tricky because, yes, day one, you're not going to be on all of those places. But firstly, I would say I would try personally to be thinking about being in all of them fairly quickly, if you could. I think it's remembering that, like, it's, especially early on, it's relatively risk-free. If you can find a way of doing it quite affordably, it's fairly risk-free being in a few different places, because what you want to be doing is testing out those different places and where you're getting traction, because it will vary depending on what you're selling. So I would be quickly trying to have a balance between all 3 of those. But if I absolutely had to choose, again, it would slightly depend on whatever you're selling. But I would say as number 1, I would go on Amazon. I would, if I had to. I'd say Amazon, but I would be very nervous about doing Amazon, but not quickly developing your own online shop. And more importantly, not on the high street or anywhere else, but actually having some sort of brand presence outside of Amazon. Somewhere else you can tell the story, even if you're stocked in a couple of independent UK retail stores that you built a relationship with, so that you can do some videos and create some content and stories around that stuff. Just somewhere that you can hold on to the story, because I do hear lots of bad stories about when businesses grow, that they become too dependent on Amazon and not able to grow other channels. So I'd say, yes, do start on Amazon. Amazon is an unbelievably fast, affordable way of building an audience and building sales. It is, and it's sort of too big to ignore. But start on Amazon very quickly. Have your own shop ready. And look, you mentioned Shopify there, but especially in the UK, it is getting so quick and easy to develop in partnership with Shopify a UK online store. I mean, it is, you know, becoming increasingly affordable to do that as well. There are a lot of agencies in the UK who do it for, you know, not a lot of money. So I would do that very quickly. But yes, if I had to choose, start with Amazon.
Jack, we are slightly behind schedule. I would like to thank you very much, for joining us on this webinar. I think these were very insightful statements and insights. And thank you for this great presentation. Sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, vielen lieben Dank fürs Zusehen. Wir hoffen, dass Sie hier einiges mitnehmen konnten. Zum Schluss noch ein paar kurze Hinweise. Sie haben es eingangs schon gehört. Also wenn Sie noch mehr vom Jack sehen und hören möchten, dazu gibt es die Möglichkeit am 5. Mai in Wien im Rahmen der Excellence Austria 2026. Sie haben dazu den Link im Chat. Und dann noch, wie gesagt, 3 Veranstaltungen, auf die wir Sie hinweisen wollen. Wir haben diesen Donnerstag am 16. April ein Update zum Arbeitsrecht im Vereinigten Königreich. Also es stehen die umfassendsten Änderungen der letzten 30 Jahre an und in diesem Webinar behandeln wir, was für Sie als österreichisches Unternehmen am UK-Markt relevant sein kann. Beim zweiten Webinar, welches am 20. April 2026 stattfindet, erfahren Sie spannende Entwicklungsperspektiven für österreichische Unternehmen im Bereich des nachhaltigen Bauens. Und dann zuletzt das Go UK Export Bootcamp 2026 vom 28. September bis 1. Oktober. Hier erfahren Sie von Expertinnen, Vertrauensanwältinnen aus erster Hand, wie Sie als österreichisches KMU auf dem britischen Markt quasi expandieren und durchstarten können. Sie erhalten, wie gesagt, die Folien in den kommenden Tagen und auch die Aufzeichnung auch per E-Mail. Wir bedanken uns vielmals fürs Zusehen und freuen uns aufs nächste Mal. Liebe Grüße nach Österreich.